mad science? Is it still mad if you're laughing? The answer to this question and more were divulged in the private notebooks of Sir Humphry Davy over 200 years ago. Today, we interview Professor Sharon Ruston, principal investigator of the Davy Notebooks Project. This crowdsourcing project, hosted by the Zooniverse, gave thousands of volunteer readers and transcribers access to Davy's personal writings, where he divulged his greatest ambitions, most significant discoveries, and late-night attempts at poetry after inhaling nitrous oxide for science. What secrets did these volunteers unearth while peeping the private pages of this audacious man of chemistry? I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'm Stacey Quasar, and this is News at the Speed of Light. Professor Sharon Ruston, it is an absolute honor to be meeting with you today. Your work on the Davy Notebooks Project is inspiring, to say the least. The way you rallied the public to help read and transcribe 75 200-year-old notebooks written by a dead man in their spare time is quite a feat. So my first question is, how did you convince them? Why does Humphry Davy deserve their precious free time as opposed to, say, a smoothie run or scrolling through some AI images of sweet buns turning into pugs?
Thank you for that question. I think that Humphry Davy is quite well known, particularly maybe in Britain. He was one of the most famous scientists of the early 19th century. He isolated more chemical elements than anyone else has before or since. I think people enjoyed it because it's kind of like a puzzle. So you're trying to work out what he's writing. I think people came like a little bit addicted to it themselves. They kind of enjoyed the work and did a lot of it.
Humphry Davy, he was known for being dashing, daring, and delectably dapper. Also potentially a bit of a druggie. Can you give me an example of another one of his great achievements that perhaps starts with a D? Bonus points if it does.
Well, he did actually doodle quite a lot in their notebooks, and there's quite a lot of drawings. Lots of doodles of faces in profile, but we could never work out who they were.
A dashing, daring, druggy doodler. Quite a catch. Davy often made a spectacle of himself entertaining the public, sucking up newly discovered gases on stage at the Royal Institute, a practice which we sadly no longer see at educational institutes today. What have you learned is high Davy-like? Is he silly and more sociable, or is he paranoid and non-communicative?
He was the first person to inhale nitrous oxide when people thought it was fatal to do so. So that shows he was quite foolhardy. He tried lots of different gases. I guess he was kind of scientific in the way he went about it. While he did experiment on himself, he very much tried to record exactly how much of the gas he was having, what effect it had on him. So the notebooks are an attempt at an accurate record, and he does lots of silly things when he's off his head on nitrous oxide. Sometimes I think he writes poetry as well, which is perhaps something that you wouldn't expect.
Do you have an example of a poem that you could perhaps read?
Yeah, so I wonder about this one, whether he composed this either under the influence or in an attempt to try and capture what it felt like to breathe nitrous oxide. So it's called On Breathing the Nitrous Oxide. Not in the ideal dreams of wild desire have I beheld a rapture wakening form. My bosom burns with no unhallowed fire, yet is my cheek with rushy blushes warm. Yet are my eyes with sparkling lustre filled, yet is my mouth implete with murmuring sound, yet are my limbs with inward transports thrilled, and clad with newborn mightiness around.
My God, Humphry, he's lit my bosom afire. Being a giggle boy himself, I think it fair we have a little laugh at Davy's expense. What is the cringiest thing one of the volunteers has found in Davy's notebooks?
Well, one of the cringiest things in the notebooks, which we have had much discussion about with the volunteers, is the very large handwriting Davy and Newton. He's obviously under the influence of nitrous oxide. It's a very self-aggrandizing statement where he's comparing himself to Newton, putting himself on the same line as Newton and the same page. And I think, he was very young at that point.
How many volunteers were there? Thousands?
3,841.
I'm curious if Humphry Davy knew that there were 3,841 people in his future who would be seeing these notes if he would have taken a little extra care before dashing things down in his notebooks,
Lord Byron made sure that one of his friends burned his notebooks because they were so scandalous, and the letters are quite scandalous, so what was in the notebooks? Who knows?
They knew that Lord Byron was a naughty boy. Humphry Davy, pretty naughty. Not as naughty as Lord Byron. Now, Professor Sharon Ruston, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to get my eyes on more of these scandalous little notebooks myself.
So they are hosted by Lancaster Digital Collections. They're on the website there, and you can see them, search them. I'd love for people to read them.
I'll be pouring a glass of wine and spending all night by the fire. Humphrey, you can't get away from me. Thank you, Professor Sharon. Well, there you have it, folks. Next time you put a pen to paper with the intent of divulging your greatest secrets, make sure you write clearly, or else thousands of strangers may need to work together to transcribe your cringiest ponderings, especially if you've made some of the greatest scientific discoveries to date. If you'd like to volunteer to transcribe some scandalous historical writings, visit zooniverse.org to see what projects are available. Who knows what kind of cringe you may discover? I'm Stacey Quasar, and this is News at the Speed of Light.